3 years ago, I contracted bacterial meningitis. I live in South Florida. I don't believe there was an outbreak going on or anything, so I'm not sure how I caught it or who I could have caught it from. I started developing really bad symptoms: painful headaches, confusion, sleepiness, nausea, and lack of appetite. But when the hallucinations started, that's when I knew I had something really serious. Laying sick in bed while my husband was at work, I heard a child's voice call Mom from downstairs. We don't have any kids. I dragged myself out of bed to look down the stairway and called my husband's name. Of course, he didn't answer because he was at work. The headache I had from standing was too much, so I went back to bed. For a second time, I heard a voice call from downstairs. It said, "Hello?" I picked up the phone and called my husband, freaking out to him about the scary child's voice from inside the house and that I thought I was hallucinating. He heard how distressed I was over the phone, so he left work early to bring me to the hospital. While waiting for him to get home, I changed out of my pajamas. While doing so, I had to run to the bathroom to throw up. As I was mid-throwing up, I heard another voice from outside of the bathroom. I couldn't hear what it might have said, nor could I tell if it sounded the same as the other voice I heard. I was losing my mind. I wasn't diagnosed until I arrived at the hospital. Apparently, if untreated, what I had could be very serious, even fatal. The doctor told me the hallucination part was rather unusual, but not unheard of. I was given antibiotics through a needle shortly after I arrived at the hospital with my husband. The doctor told me that I was fortunate to have come to the hospital so quickly. If I had waited much longer, this could have had lasting effects or possibly have been fatal. My husband stayed with me for a few hours in the room. I was told I was going to have to stay there for a few days to a week, given the severity of my symptoms. Around 10 o'clock, my husband left to go home as he had work the next day. The nurse told me to call her if I should have any issues, though I still felt like absolute death. I nodded off pretty quickly. I started having this dream where my ex-husband was in the room over my bed, looking down at me and talking. He was saying horrible things about my current husband. He patted my head and said he was glad I was okay, and that he came as soon as he saw my husband leave. He went into this rant about how he despises my current husband and wants to kill him. He kept rubbing my forehead, then left the room. I often have bad dreams about my ex-husband because of how toxic and abusive our marriage was and why it ended, which I'd rather not include. I woke up in this drowsy, lightheaded state and looked around the room. There was a chair pulled up in front of my hospital bed, but no one was sitting in it. It wasn't like that when my husband left. It was still the middle of the night, so I went back to sleep. I woke up the next morning to the nurse in the room. I told her about the weirdly vivid dream I had, and she left. She told me that wasn't a dream, that my cousin came to visit me last night. I told her I don't have any cousins that live in the state. She looked more serious now and said, "Well, someone who said they're your cousin David visited you late last night." David was the name of my ex-husband. After explaining better, the nurse got a doctor, and the doctor told me the antibiotics may have caused delirium, which hindered my ability to recognize sleep from wakefulness, hence why I was so vividly hearing what David was saying. I called my husband to tell him what happened, and of course, he was livid and concerned. He came back again that night after work, but that day, I texted David, asking what the hell he was thinking visiting me and how he knew I was in the hospital. My text delivered, but he ignored it. I sent a follow-up, telling him I heard all of his threats towards my husband and that I'd be getting the police involved. Minutes later, he responded saying, "I never made any threats towards your husband. I was simply there when I heard what happened to make sure you were okay. You must have heard things in your sleep." I responded, "Stay out of my life or I'll get the police involved again." He didn't respond. After this, I never told my husband about the threats I heard in my drowsy, half-asleep state because I didn't know if they were real or not. With a mix of the antibiotics and my already having weird audible hallucinations the day before, I don't think it's impossible that what I heard wasn't actually what was said, but I could be wrong. I left the hospital the next week.